free to hug my family. I'm free to start over. This is the greatest day of my life. My heart is just bursting with gratitude. President Donald John Trump. Woo! Thank you.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Hunting terrorists in the skies above Baghdad. There are two things you need: faith in God and a Hellfire missile.
Conservative warrior John James.
I flew Apaches because I wanted to take the fight to the enemy. Now I'm volunteering for a new fight: to secure the borders, defend our constitutional rights, and protect Michigan jobs. I'm John James. I hate politics, but I love this country, and I approve this message because America is worth fighting for.
Hello, welcome to Fighting for the Republic. I didn't plan on scoping tonight, but I just caught this article I wanted to present. And fix my stuff here. There we go. Hope everybody's having a good night, had a good day. Hello, CT. So I wanted to get right to this because it's really something that, you know, it actually, I'm going to hold off that. There's something else I want to present first. I want to present a couple of things. But it has to do with certain issues that we've been discussing for a while. Many. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I thought I'd get some of the articles that I haven't been able to get to in the past week or so and kind of get caught up a little bit while I'm here. I'm glad everybody can join on D-Live, Twitch, Twitter, Periscope, and Facebook, and YouTube. So I hope everybody's having a good night and had time to rest if you're still at work. Hopefully your shift is almost over and can relax and enjoy your family and friends and what have you. First thing to get to is President Trump takes matters into his own hands and says the DHS deploys 150 agents to Chicago. Now, over the years, there have been many killings in Chicago under Emanuel, now under Lightfoot. Nobody can really seem to get it under control. I have talked to a co-worker who used to live in Chicago, and they say it is what you see it is. There's a lot of violence. Now, when it was under Emanuel, Deadfish Emanuel, as he's referred to, that there's mysterious guns and all kinds of weapons in certain places, and if true, now this is only what I heard, that, you know, the mayors over the time have been wanting this war between rival gangs and black on black violence, but nobody seems to want to do anything about it. Nobody seems to want it to address the problem in Chicago. Well, it looks like the president has decided he is going to deal with it himself. Just a few hours ago, we ran into a story that describes the battle of words. And bullets talking to the place of one of America's biggest and most notoriously corrupt cities, Chicago. Chicago has been in the middle of a gun violence epidemic for years. President Trump has a vocal critic. Hi, who, me? I lost my place. in the middle of the violence epidemic for the years, and now President Trump has a vocal critic of the city's Democratic leadership. If it can be called that, now Trump is taking matter into his own hands. Which he did say, if you guys cannot get your shit together, he will take care of it, and he's going to. The president is in a tweet noted guns violence that endured the 4th of July on both cities, with nearly 40 people wounded in the Big Apple and 72 in the Windy City, including 13 dead. Chicago and New York City crime numbers are way up. Federal government ready, willing, able to help if asked. In Chicago, between 11:09 and Saturday and 2:15 a.m. Sunday, 13 people were killed and 59 injured in a shooting, according to the Chicago Sun. At least 2 children, a 7-year-old girl, 14-year-old boy, were. Thank you for the lemon. Really appreciate that. Who, me? Of course, the mayor of Chicago, Miss Lightfoot, wants nothing to do with President Trump unless he plans to further restrict gun ownerships in the federal level, or pay her bills with our tax money, which I doubt either is going to happen. On Monday morning, Mayor Lightfoot said she's got great concern about the general possibility of President Donald Trump sending feds to Chicago based upon what has happened in Portland. If Trump wants to help, she said, he can boost Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosive, reduce the fully fund prosecutors. Trump signaled his willingness to law down the law. That must have been a typo. It's kind of like lay down the law. I'm going to do something that I can tell you, because we're not going to leave New York and Chicago and Philadelphia, Detroit, and Baltimore, and all of these. Oklahoma is a mess. Oakland is a mess. We're not going to let this happen in our country, all run by liberal Democrats. Declared. This is true. Look at the statistics. All Democratic run, not only cities but states, have a high degree of violence and low income. Michigan was was booming until this coronavirus crap. But suicides, drug abuse are up because of it. President further says, we're going to have more federal law enforcement than I can tell you, Trump stated. In Portland, we've done a fantastic job. We've been there 3 days, and they already have done a fantastic job, a very short period of time, no problems. We now learned that the president was not just talking. The Trump administration, Department of Homeland Security, is planning to deploy agents in the Windy City, supposedly an effort to quell the city's shooting unrest. Now, there really has not been a lot of news or information coming out of Chicago what's going on. It's mainly been Portland is where they've been focusing on. We are now learning that President Trump, Chicago Tribune went on to report the U.S. Department of Homeland Security investigations, or HSI, agents are set set to assist the federal law enforcement and Chicago police in crime-fighting efforts. To the source familiar with the matter, though specific plans on what the agents are going to do has not been made public. Because this is what he does. He does not announce what he's going to do. He never has, and he never will. This is not the Obama administration when they told you everything they planned on doing. I mean, it was kind of like you're letting the bad guys know what you're going to plan. I mean, just look in the past 8 years of that administration. Now, since then, yes, agents are now in military, if you will, Homeland Security, all of them are in Portland. And that will be coming up in a second. Here's a clip from Fox Business. Senate releases bombshell documents uncovering Trump Russian probe. Which, you know, when they say bombshell, we probably already know. So let's see. I have not seen this. I have been very busy with other things. So let's take a look.
Lindsey Graham releasing 2 documents that the Justice Department declassified. They significantly undercut the FBI's Trump-Russia probe. Let's welcome Republican Lee Zeldin of New York. He's on House Foreign Affairs. Great to see you, Congressman. Your reaction to this development?
It's great to see the Senate chairs taking action. I think that much of the American public has been demanding this kind of accountability and transparency for a long time. And as we've seen on the House side, where Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler will be using their gavels to try to remove a sitting president, let's get the other 97% of the story by having these senators with gavels dig into these cases.
All right, let's go through it. The first document, it's about a 40-page FBI interview with Christopher Steele's primary source. It took place with the FBI in January 2017. It shows that Steele's own source, who was on Steele's own payroll, he was not Russian. He was getting paid by Christopher Steele. Senator Graham says this person, quote, destroyed Steele's information, undercut his dossier, that it was a miscarriage of justice. Let me just quickly go through what this source was telling the FBI. This source told the FBI he was surprised that Steele gave the FBI third-hand and second-hand rumor and made like it was fact, and then the FBI used that information to get wiretaps. This person was not Russian. Again, Steele was paying this source. And that this source could not recall how Steele got the information that he put into his dossier that the FBI used to wiretap the Trump team. So this Steele's own source is undercutting to the FBI what Steele was saying. Your reaction?
The reaction is that when they were going for renewals on these FISA applications, that they should have hit the pause button. They should have stopped, and we could have a whole discussion as to whether or not they should have been able to get the FISA warrants in the first place against Carter Page. But as they continue to see the narrative get destroyed, the decision should be made through proper vetting. There's something called the Woods procedures. It's also important to be providing the FISA judges not just with the best information in favor of your application, but also the best information that you have against your application, because the person who's getting spied on isn't otherwise represented inside of that courtroom. So what's being exposed through today's release of information, aside from that debate over whether there should have been a warrant in the first place, is that these third and fourth renewals should have absolutely never gone forward with what the DOJ and FBI knew.
So again, you remember the FBI was still doing surveillance on the Trump team going into 2017 when after the president took office. Here's the second declassified document. It's a bombshell. It shows former FBI official Peter Strzok disagreeing with a New York Times article in February 2017. The Times was reporting that Russian intelligence did have ties to the Trump team, but Peter Strzok typed, quote, that we have not seen evidence of that. We are unaware of any Trump advisors engaging in conversations with Russian intelligence. But the FBI told the FISA court it believed Russian intelligence was working with Trump team members. And here's the other thing. Is this perjury with the FISA court? And who was leaking to the media that the Russian intelligence was working with the Trump team? Who was leaking that?
Well, first off, on the first question, is there absolutely have been false statements that have been made throughout this entire process. We know of many false statements that have been made publicly. Hopefully this is part of Durham's investigation and Durham takes action sooner rather than later. This is not something that should just get punted past the November election. We want accountability right now. As far as the leaks go, remember part of this was orchestrated directly from the FBI director, James Comey. There was this desire to trigger a second special counsel. The whole Mueller probe was a consequence of FBI Director Mueller leaking through this professor in New York to the media some information, some of which was actually classified. That's a scandal in and of itself. This is a criminal offense when you leak classified information. Clearly, there was a huge abuse of power that was going on. Durham needs to take action.
Yeah, so all of what we were just talking about, Congressman, happened way before Robert Mueller was appointed. And the FBI knew by the time that Robert Mueller was appointed, they didn't have the evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. That's what happened. Congressman, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, this is true. The insurance policy was I believe, dossier. But if you haven't seen the notes, go back. We got to look at the original notes. Now, when they falsified, number one, what is going to happen to the judge who rubber stamped this in the first place? They knew it was false. They said, well, it wasn't written correctly. They went back, rewrote it, then they stamped it through. So the FBI was told that Steele was very unreliable. And we can go all through the whole thing, but it takes way too long. A lot of us know this. If you're not very familiar with it, please go research it. And this is how we got to the point today. But when Strutt and Page falsified the 302s, and I've been saying it for a long time, that this was kind of it. They had to make sure that this was going to trigger the Mueller report in general. So it's quite intriguing, if you will. If we go back to Portland, to the previous story, law enforcement used unmarked vehicles to grab protesters in Portland streets. I love this. This is the best thing since sliced bread. Pick them up, bag them, throw them into the clink. We need this. I've had enough of it. This should have been a long time ago. With the governor, they could have issued the National Guard to get a handle on this. Early hours of July 15th, after a night spent protesting at the Multnomah County Justice Center of Mark O. Hartford Federal Courthouse. Mark, thank you for the lemon. Appreciate it. Let's see. Mark Pettibone and his friend Connor O'Shara decided to head home. It had been a calm night compared, and most of the protesting downtown by 2 a.m. Law enforcement hadn't used any tear gas and a few explosions. Both the Portland Police Bureau and federal law enforcement officers had stayed out of sight, blocking West Campson Square. Pettibone Shara dumped into a ground of people and warned them that people are counterfeit were driving around the area, unmarked cars, minivans, grabbing people off the streets. So, this was terrifying to hear, he said. A little bit further. Okay, they had barely made it half a block when an unmarked minivan pulled up in front of them. I see you guys in camo, Sheriff said. 4 or 5 of them popped out, opened the door, and it was like, oh shit, I don't know who you are or what you want with us. Well, they're protesters, they're Antifa. Their ass are getting arrested. Common sense. Federal law enforcement officers have been using unmarked vehicles to drive around downtown Portland and detain protesters since July 14th. Personal account of multi-videos posted online show the officers driving up to people, detaining individuals with no explanations of why they have been arrested and drove off. The tactic appears to be another exclusion of federal forces deployed on Portland city streets. The federal officers of President Trump have said they plan to quell nightly protests outside federal courthouses, Justice Center to hold, having lasted more than 6 weeks. That gives you a summary of what they're doing, and I played a couple of videos the other night. Now, I have no problem with this. Either the police chief is in cahoots, or she's getting orders to stand down, or they're outnumbered. It's one. It could be all three. It could be who knows. But it is odd when Chaz Chop was around that she stood in front of the so-called leader and negotiated. You don't negotiate. You get the National Guard there. You take care of it. Nobody puts up a sanctuary zone, whatever the hell you want to call it, in this country, ever. You see it, you take care of it. That was probably the first time I've gotten so upset that they allowed that to happen. They allowed it to stay as long as they did. There was 2 of them. And I believe there's a third, but I'm not quite sure, in Atlanta. Might just be a sit-in, simple protest. You don't hear about it. But when you see Chaz Chop or what happened in Washington, which they did take care of that very quickly, good going, the good men and women of the Washington Police Department, he did a fantastic job. You have to deal with these people. You cannot allow them to do this. This is our country. It's not theirs. They want their own little country. They can all chip in. They can go buy a little island. That could be your Chaz, whatever the hell you want to call it. Freak Island. It's not going to happen here. It's not. We're not going to allow it. We're not going to allow this to continue. Now we have men and women trying to defend their homes, and they're getting prosecuted. It'll be interesting to see what happens in this case. And that is in California. Surprise. If convicted, I hope the president will grant them a pardon for doing what was right. What they have the right to do is protect their home. Because these men were threatening them, saying it was their house. They said they were picking out rooms already in this couple's house. It's a nice house. These are the kind of thugs we're dealing with. And we should never put up with it. Ever. Protests are one thing. Mob, riots, Antifa, Black Lives Matter is a whole hell new ball game. Who me says Seattle mayor did nothing. Said something because she knows she was not getting reelected. Well, not doing anything doesn't matter, or not even say anything. Oh well, wait a minute. That was a love fest. Remember, that was a black party when 3 people died, and then when they called it a no police zone, then they go outside and beg the police and the EMTs to come in. Real good. But you know what? The governor and the mayor are both accomplices and should be prosecuted. And I'm not joking. They should be very much prosecuted. There's many individuals who are accomplice aiding and abetting. It's against the law. They all should know better. AG Barr was had some remarks on policy at the George Ford Presidential Museum the other day, and I just have not had time to get to it, and I wanted to present that to you.
And I'm the United States Attorney for the Western District of Michigan. It's my honor this morning to introduce to you William Barr, the Attorney General of the United States. But first, I want to briefly recognize those from the business and academic
yes, they
communities
do.
who've come here today to hear firsthand the Attorney General speak about the global ambitions of the People's Republic of China and the challenge that poses for business and our security. American innovation is often the target of PRC espionage, exploitation, malign influence, and outright theft. But we in law enforcement have pledged to work with you to protect your essential enterprises from these threats. In fact, we have law enforcement representatives here today to talk to you, and I would welcome you to stay after the Attorney General's remarks for a presentation on the department's China initiative by senior officials of the National Security Division, specifically Adam Hickey, the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for that division, my counterpart from the Eastern District of Michigan, Matthew Schneider, and myself. So now let me tell you a little bit about our Attorney General. Occasionally, our country has the good fortune of seeing inspired leaders rise through the ranks of public service, step away to take on leadership roles in the private sector, only to come back when we needed them. Attorney General Barr's career is punctuated by repeated calls to serve that he has answered. After earning his AB from Columbia University and an MA in Chinese Studies, he began his first career in public service with the Central Intelligence Agency. While at the CIA, he enrolled in law school and earned his degree with highest honors from George Washington University. And after graduating, he served as a law clerk with Judge Malcolm Wilkie of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. From there, he joined a private firm, but it wasn't shortly thereafter that he joined the domestic policy staff of the White House in the Ronald Reagan administration. He returned to law firm life and soon made partner. But in 1989, under George H.W. Bush, he was tapped for the role of Assistant Attorney General of the Office of Legal Counsel. In 1990, he became the Deputy Attorney General. And in 1991, he became our 77th Attorney General of the United States, serving through the remainder of President Bush's term. For the 18 years that followed, Attorney General Barr lent his leadership to the private sector. His roles included serving as the Executive Vice President and General Counsel for GTE Corporation, as well as for Verizon. And after retiring from Verizon, he returned to the private practice of law with a private firm before yet another call to serve came. In December 2018, President Donald Trump announced his intention to nominate Mr. Barr to serve as our 85th Attorney General. After Senate confirmation, Chief Justice John Roberts administered the oath, and Attorney General Barr became one of only 2 people in American history to serve twice in this role. So please join me now in welcoming Attorney General William Barr.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your kind introduction. And I'd like to say that I really appreciate the work that Andrew and Matt, our U.S. attorneys for the Eastern and Western District of Michigan, are doing here for the people of Michigan and all the law enforcement community from Michigan that is here today. We really appreciate your work. And as Andrew said, after my remarks, they're going to put on a presentation on the China Initiative, which I think you'd find very interesting. So if you have the time, I urge you to stay for that. And I'd like to thank the leadership and staff of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum, especially Elaine Didier, for hosting this event. And also thank the Ford Presidential Foundation and its executive director, Joe Calvaruso. Even under normal circumstances, it's hard to put together an event like this, but in the current circumstances, it's especially challenging, and I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all of you who've come. I know many have come from around the state, and I appreciate the effort that was made to be here for these remarks. I was last in Grand Rapids maybe 30 years ago, John. John Smetanka from here was one of my principal deputies when I was Deputy Attorney General and stayed on while I was Attorney General. He was the U.S. Attorney here in the Western District, so John, it's great to see you here. I feel a special bond to the Ford administration, so it's appropriate to be here today for these remarks, because I started out in the CIA in 1973, and then President Ford took office, and because of what was going on at the agency, I had the privilege of working closely with many of the superb people that he brought into government, many of whom I had the opportunity to work with over the years, and several of whom were my mentors. One of the people I met was the Attorney General at that time, Ed Levy, who President Ford had made Attorney General, and his portrait is up in my conference room, and his grandson, Will Levy, is my Chief of Staff. So, as I say, I feel especially close to the Ford administration. While I wasn't a political appointee in that administration, many of the political appointees I worked with over the years were really cut their teeth during the Ford administration. I'm privileged to speak here today about what may prove to be the most important issue for our nation and the world in the 21st century, and that is the United States response to the global ambitions of the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP rules with an iron fist over one of the great ancient civilizations of the world. It seeks to leverage the immense power, productivity, and ingenuity of the Chinese people to overthrow the rule-based international system and to make the world safe for dictatorship. How the United States responds to this challenge will have historic implications and will determine whether the United States and its liberal democratic allies will continue to shape their own destiny, or whether the CCP and its autocratic tributaries will control the future. You know, since the 1890s, at least, the United States has been the technological leader of the world. And from that prowess has come our prosperity, the opportunity for generations of Americans, and our security. It's because of that that we were able to play such a pivotal role in world history by turning back the threat of fascism and the threat of communism. What's at stake these days is whether we can maintain that leadership position and that technological leadership. Are we going to be the generation that has allowed that to be stolen, which is really stealing the future of our children and our grandchildren? Several weeks ago, the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, spoke about the CCP's ideology and global ambitions. He declared, and I agree, that the days of American passivity and naivete regarding the People's Republic of China are over. And last week, the FBI Director, Chris Wray, described how the CCP pursues its ambitions through the nefarious and even illegal conduct, including industrial espionage, theft, extortion, cyber attacks, and malign influence activities. In the coming days, you will hear from Secretary Mike Pompeo, who will sum up what is at stake for the United States and the free world. Now, Chris Wray told me that shortly after his speech last week, one of the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party pronounced that his speech was particularly disgusting. I told him that I was going to aim today to be despicable. But I'll settle for especially disgusting. But no matter how the Chinese seek to characterize it, I do hope that my speech and Mike Pompeo's speech will encourage the American people to reevaluate their relationship with China, so long as it continues to be ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. It is fitting that we're here today at the Ford Presidential Museum. Gerald Ford served in the highest echelons of the government at the dawn of America's re-engagement with China, which began obviously with President Nixon in 1972. And 3 years later, in 1975, President Ford visited China for a summit with PRC leaders, including Mao Zedong. At the time, it was unthinkable that China would emerge after the Cold War as a near peer competitor of the United States. Yet even then, there were signs of China's immense latent power. In the joint report of their visit to China in 1972, House Majority Leader Hale Boggs and then Minority Leader Gerald Ford wrote, "If she manages to achieve as she aspires, China in the next half century can emerge as a self-sufficient power of 1 billion people." This last impression of the reality of China's colossal potential is perhaps the most vivid of our journey. As our small party traveled through that boundless land, this sense of a giant stirring, a dragon waking, gave us much to ponder. It is now nearly 50 years later, and the prescient ponderings of these two congressmen have come to pass. Deng Xiaoping, whose economic reform launched China's remarkable rise, had a famous motto: hide your strength, bide your time. That is precisely what China has done. China's economy has quietly grown from about 2% of the world's GDP in 1980 to nearly 20% today. And by some estimates based on purchasing power parity, the Chinese economy is already larger than ours. The General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, who has centralized power to a degree not seen since the dictatorship of Mao Zedong, now speaks openly of China moving closer to the center stage, building a socialism that is superior to capitalism, and replacing the American dream with the Chinese solution. China is no longer hiding its strength, nor biding its time. From the perspective of its communist rulers, China's time has arrived. The People's Republic of China is now engaged in an economic blitzkrieg, an aggressive, orchestrated, whole of government, indeed whole of society campaign to seize the commanding heights of the global economy and to surpass the United States as the world's preeminent technological superpower. A centerpiece of this effort is the Chinese Communist Party's Made in China 2025 initiative, a plan for PRC domination of high-tech industries like robotics, advanced information technology, aviation, electric vehicles, and many other technologies. Backed by hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies, this initiative poses a real threat to U.S. technological leadership. Despite World Trade Organization rules prohibiting quotas for domestic output, Made in China 2025 sets targets for domestic market share, sometimes as high as 70%, in core components and basic materials for industries, such as robotics and telecommunications. It is clear that the PRC seeks not merely to join the ranks of other advanced industrial economies, but to replace them altogether. Made in China 2025 is the latest iteration of the PRC's state-led mercantilist economic model. For American companies in the global marketplace, free and fair competition with China has long been a fantasy. To tilt the playing field to its advantage, China's communist government has perfected a wide array of predatory and often unlawful tactics: currency manipulation, tariffs, quotas, state-led strategic investment and acquisition, theft and forced transfer of intellectual property, state subsidies, dumping, cyber attacks, and industrial espionage. About 80% of all federal economic espionage prosecutions allege conduct undertaken for the benefit of the Chinese state. And about 60% of all trade secret theft cases have been connected to China. The PRC also seeks to dominate key trade routes and infrastructure in Eurasia, Africa, and the Pacific. In the South China Sea, for example, through which about 1/3 of the world's maritime trade passes, the PRC has asserted expansive and historically dubious claims to nearly the entire waterway, flouted the rulings of international courts, built artificial islands and placed military outposts on them, and harassed its neighbors, ships, and fishing boats. Another ambitious project to spread its power and influence is the PRC's Belt and Roads Infrastructure Initiative. Although billed as foreign aid, in fact, these investments appear designed to serve the PRC's strategic interests and domestic economic needs. For example, the PRC has been criticized for loading poor countries up with debt, refusing to renegotiate terms, and then taking control of the infrastructure itself, as it did with the Sri Lankan port of Hambantota in 2017. This is little more than a form of modern-day colonialism. Just as consequential, however, are the PRC's plans to dominate the world's digital infrastructure through its Digital Silk Road initiative. I have previously spoken at length about the grave risks of allowing the world's most powerful dictatorship to build the next generation of global telecommunications networks known as 5G. Perhaps less widely known are the PRC's efforts to surpass the United States in other cutting-edge fields like artificial intelligence. Through innovations such as machine learning and big data, artificial intelligence allows machines to mimic human functions, such as recognizing faces, interpreting spoken words, driving vehicles, and playing games of skill, much like chess or even the more complex Chinese game of Go. In 2017, Beijing unveiled its Next Generation Artificial Intelligence Plan, a blueprint for leading the world in AI by 2030. Whichever nation emerges as the global leader in AI will be best positioned to unlock not only its considerable economic potential, but a range of military applications, such as the use of computer vision to gather intelligence. The PRC's drive for technological supremacy is complemented by its plan to monopolize rare earth materials, which play a vital role in industries such as consumer electronics, electric vehicles, medical devices, and military hardware. According to the Congressional Research Service, from the 1960s to the 1980s, the United States led the world in rare earth production. Since then, production has shifted almost entirely to China, in large part due to the lower labor costs and lighter economic and environmental regulation. The United States is now dangerously dependent on the PRC for these essential materials. Overall, China is America's top supplier, accounting for about 80% of our imports. The risk of dependence are real. In 2010, for example, Beijing cut exports of rare earth materials to Japan after an incident involving the disputed islands in the East China Sea. The PRC could do the same to us. As China's progress in these critical sectors illustrates, the PRC's predatory economic policies are succeeding. For 100 years, America was the world's largest manufacturer, allowing us to serve as the world's arsenal of democracy. China overtook the United States in manufacturing output in 2010. The PRC is now the world's arsenal of dictatorship. How did China accomplish all this? No one should underestimate the ingenuity and industry of the Chinese people. At the same time, no one should doubt that America made China's meteoric rise possible. China has reaped enormous benefits from the free flow of American aid and trade. In 1980, Congress granted the PRC Most Favored Nation trading status. In the 1990s, American companies strongly supported the PRC's accession to the World Trade Organization and the permanent normalization of trade relations. Today, U.S.-China trade totals about $700 billion. Last year, Newsweek ran a cover story titled, "How America's Biggest Companies Made China Great Again." The article details how China's communist leaders lured American business with the promise of market access, and then, having profited from American investment and know-how, turned increasingly hostile. The PRC used tariffs and quotas to pressure American companies to give up their technology and form joint ventures with Chinese companies. Regulators then discriminated against American firms using tactics like holding up permits. Yet few companies, even Fortune 500 giants, have been willing to bring formal trade complaints for fear of angering Beijing. Just as American companies have become dependent on Chinese markets, the United States as a whole now relies on the PRC for many vital goods and services. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown a spotlight on that dependency. For example, China is the world's largest producer of certain protective equipment, such as face masks and medical gowns. In March, as the pandemic spread around the world, the PRC hoarded the masks for itself, blocking producers, including American companies, from exporting them to other countries that needed it. It then attempted to exploit the shortage for propaganda purposes, shipping limited quantities of often defective equipment, and then requiring foreign leaders to publicly thank Beijing for these shipments. China's dominance of the world's markets for medical goods goes beyond masks and gowns. It has become the United States' largest supplier of medical devices, while at the same time discriminating against American medical companies in China. China's government has targeted foreign firms for greater regulatory scrutiny, instructed Chinese hospitals to buy products made in China, and pressured American firms to build factories in China where their intellectual property is more vulnerable to theft. As one expert has observed, American medical device manufacturers are effectively creating their own competitors. America has also depends on Chinese supply chains in other vital sectors, especially pharmaceuticals. America remains the global leader in drug discovery, but China is now the world's largest producer of active pharmaceutical ingredients known as APIs. As one Defense Health Agency official noted, should China decide to limit or restrict the delivery of APIs on the United States, it could result in severe shortages of pharmaceuticals for both domestic and military uses. To achieve dominance in pharmaceuticals, China's rulers went to the same playbook that they've used to gut other American industries. In 2008, the PRC designated pharmaceutical production as a high-value added industry and boosted Chinese companies with subsidies and export tax rebates. Meanwhile, the PRC has systematically preyed on American companies. American firms' well-known obstacles in the Chinese health market include drug approval delays, unfair pricing limitations, IP theft, and counterfeiting. Chinese nationals working as employees at pharma companies have been caught stealing trade secrets both in America and in China. And the CCP has long engaged in cyber espionage and hacking of U.S. academic medical centers and healthcare companies. In fact, PRC-linked hackers have targeted American universities and firms in a bid to steal the IP related to coronavirus treatments and vaccines, sometimes disrupting the work of our researchers. Having been caught covering up the coronavirus outbreak, Beijing is desperate for a public relations coup and may hope that it will be able to claim credit for any medical breakthroughs. As all of these examples should make clear, the ultimate ambition of China's rulers isn't to trade with the United States. It is to raid the United States. If you are an American business leader, appeasing the PRC may bring short-term rewards. But in the end, the PRC's goal is to replace you. As a U.S. Chamber of Commerce report put it, the belief by foreign companies that large financial investments and sharing of expertise and significant technology transfers would lead to an ever-opening China market is being replaced by boardroom banter that win-win in China means China wins twice. Although Americans hope that trade and investment would liberalize China's political system, the fundamental character of the regime has never changed. As its ruthless crackdown of Hong Kong demonstrates once again, China is no closer to democracy today than it was in 1989 when tanks confronted pro-democracy protesters in Tiananmen Square. It remains an authoritarian, one-party state in which the Chinese Communist Party wields absolute power, unchecked by popular elections, the rule of law, or an independent judiciary. The CCP surveils its own people and assigns them social credit scores, employs an army of government censors, tortures dissidents, and persecutes religious and ethnic minorities, including 1 million Uyghurs detained in indoctrination and labor camps. If what happened in China stayed in China, that would be bad enough. But instead of America's changing China, China is leveraging its economic power to change America. As this administration's China strategy recognizes, the CCP's campaign to compel ideological conformity does not stop at China's borders. Rather, the CCP seeks to extend its influence around the world, including on American soil. All too often, for the sake of short-term profits, American companies have succumbed to that influence, even at the expense of freedom and openness in the United States. Sadly, examples of American business bowing to China are legion. Take Hollywood. Hollywood's actors, producers, and directors pride themselves on celebrating freedom and the human spirit. And every year at the Academy Awards, Americans are lectured about how this country falls short of Hollywood's ideals of social justice. But Hollywood now regularly censors its own movies to appease the Chinese Communist Party, the world's most powerful violator of human rights. This censorship infects not only the versions of movies that are released in China, but also many that are shown in the United States theaters to American audiences. For example, the hit movie World War Z depicts a zombie apocalypse caused by a virus. The original version of the film reportedly contained a scene with characters speculating that the virus may have originated in China. But the studio, Paramount Pictures, reportedly told producers to delete the reference to China in the hope of landing a Chinese distribution deal. The deal never materialized. In the Marvel Studios blockbuster Doctor Strange, filmmakers changed the nationality of the major character known as the Ancient One, a Tibetan monk in the comic book. Changed it from Tibetan to Celtic. When challenged about this, a screenwriter explained that if you acknowledge that Tibet is a place and that he's Tibetan, you risk alienating 1 billion people. Or as the Chinese government might say, we're not going to show your movie because you decided to get political. These are just two examples of the many Hollywood films that have been altered one way or another to please the CCP. National Security Advisor O'Brien offered even more examples in his remarks. But many more scripts never see the light of day because writers and producers know not to test the limits. Chinese government censors don't need to say a word because Hollywood is doing their work for them. This is a massive propaganda coup for the Chinese Communist Party. The story of the film industry's submission to the CCP is a familiar one. In the past 2 decades, China has emerged as the world's largest box office. The CCP has long tightly controlled access to that lucrative market, both through quotas on American films imposed in violation of China's WTO obligations and a strict censorship regime. Increasingly, Hollywood also relies on Chinese money for financing. In 2018, films with Chinese investors accounted for 20% of the U.S. box office ticket sales, compared to only 3% 5 years earlier. But in the long run, as with other Chinese industries, the PRC may be less interested in cooperating with Hollywood than in co-opting Hollywood and eventually replacing it with its own homegrown movie productions. To accomplish this, the CCP has been following its usual modus operandi By imposing a quota on American films, the CCP pressures Hollywood studios to form joint ventures with Chinese companies, who then gain U.S. technology and know-how. As one Chinese film executive recently put it, everything we learned from Hollywood. Notably, in 2019, 8 of the 10 top grossing films in China were produced in China. Hollywood is far from alone in kowtowing to the PRC. America's big tech companies have also allowed themselves to become pawns of Chinese influence. In the year 2000, when the United States normalized trade relations with China, President Clinton hailed the new century as one in which liberty will be spread by cell phone and cable modem. Instead, over the course of the next decade, American companies such as Cisco helped the Chinese communists build the Great Firewall of China, the world's most sophisticated system for internet surveillance and censorship. Over the years, corporations such as Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, and Apple have shown themselves all too willing to collaborate with the CCP. For example, Apple recently removed the news app Quartz from its App Store in China after the Chinese government complained about the coverage of Hong Kong democracy protests. Apple also removed the apps for virtual private networks, which had allowed users to circumvent the Great Firewall and eliminated pro-democracy songs from the Chinese music store. Meanwhile, the company announced that it would be transferring some of its iCloud data to servers in China, despite concerns that the move would give the Communist Party easier access to emails, text messages, and other user information stored in the iCloud. Recently, we were able to get into 2 cell phones used by the Al-Qaeda terrorist who shot 8 Americans at the Pensacola Naval Air Station, and during the gunfight with him, he stopped, disengaged, put his cell phones down, and tried to destroy them, shooting a bullet into one of his 2 cell phones. And we thought that suggested that there might be very important information about terrorist activities in those cell phones. And for 4.5 months, we tried to get in without any help at all from Apple. Apple failed to give us any help getting into those cell phones. We were ultimately able to get in through a fluke that we will not be able to reproduce in the future, where we found communications with Al-Qaeda operatives in the Middle East up to the day before the attack. Do you think when Apple sells phones in China, that Apple phones in China are impervious to penetration by Chinese authorities? They wouldn't be sold if they were impervious to Chinese authorities. And what we've asked for is when we have a warrant from a court, that we should be able to get into those cell phones. That's the double standard that has been emerging among American tech companies. The CCP has long used public threats of retaliation and barred market access to exert influence. More recently, however, the CCP has also stepped up behind-the-scenes efforts to cultivate and coerce American business executives to further its political objectives, efforts that are all the more pernicious because they are largely hidden from public view. As China's government loses credibility around the world, the Justice Department has seen more and more PRC officials and their proxies reaching out to corporate leaders and inveighing them to favor policies and actions favored by the Chinese Communist Party. Their objective varies, but their pitch is generally the same. The business person has economic interests in China, and there is a suggestion that things will go better or worse for them. depending on their response to PRC's request. Privately pressuring and courting American corporate leaders to promote policies or U.S. politicians presents a significant threat because hiding behind American voices allows the Chinese government to elevate its influence campaigns and put a friendly face on its pro-regime policies. The legislator or the policymaker who hears from these American businessmen is properly more sympathetic to that constituent than to a foreigner. And by masking its participation in our political process, the PRC avoids accountability for its influence efforts and the public outcry that might result if its lobbying were exposed. America's corporate leaders might not think of themselves as lobbyists. You might think, for example, that cultivating a mutually beneficial relationship is just part of guangxi, the system of influential social networking necessary to do business in the PRC. But you should be alert to how you might be used and how your efforts on behalf of a foreign company or government could implicate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. FARA does not prohibit any speech or conduct, but it does require those who are acting as agents of foreign principals to publicly disclose that relationship and their political or other similar activities by registering with the Justice Department, allowing the audience to take into account the origin of the speech when evaluating credibility. By focusing on American business leaders, I don't mean to suggest that they are the only targets of Chinese influence operations, but they are principal targets today of Chinese influence operations in the United States. The Chinese Communist Party also seeks to infiltrate, censor, or co-opt American academic and research institutions. For example, dozens of American universities host Chinese government-funded Confucian institutes, which have been accused of pressuring host universities to silence discussion or cancel events on topics considered controversial by Beijing. Universities must stand up for each other, refuse to let the CCP dictate research efforts or suppress diverse voices, support colleagues and students who wish to speak their minds, and consider whether any sacrifice of academic integrity or freedom is worth the price of appeasing the CCP's demands. In a globalized world, American corporations and universities alike may view themselves as global citizens rather than as American institutions. But they should remember that what allowed them to succeed in the first place was the American free enterprise system, the rule of law, and the security afforded by America's economic, technological, and military strength. Globalization does not always point in the direction of greater freedom. A world marching to the beat of the communist Chinese drum will not be a hospitable one for institutions that depend on free markets, free trade, or the free exchange of ideas. There was a time when American companies understood that they saw them and understood this, and they saw themselves as American and proudly defended American values. In World War II, for example, the iconic American company Disney made dozens of public information films for the government, including training videos to educate American sailors on navigation tactics. During the war, over 90% of Disney's employees were devoted to the production of training and public information films. To boost the morale of America's troops, Disney also designed insignia that appeared on planes, trucks, flight jackets, and other military equipment used by American and Allied forces. I suspect that Walt Disney would be disheartened to see how the company he founded deals with foreign dictatorships today. When Disney produced Kundun, the 1997 film about the PRC's oppression of the Dalai Lama, the CCP objected to the project and pressured Disney to abandon it. Ultimately, Disney decided that it couldn't let a foreign power dictate whether it would distribute a movie in the United States. But that moment of courage wouldn't last. After the CCP banned all Disney films in China, the company lobbied hard to regain access, and the CEO apologized for Kundun, calling it a stupid mistake. Disney then began courting the PRC to open a $5.5 billion theme park in Shanghai. As part of that deal, Disney agreed to give the Chinese government officials role in its management. Of the park's full-time employees, 300 are active members of the Communist Party, and they reportedly display hammer and sickle insignia on their desks and attend party lectures at the facility during business hours. Like other American companies, Disney may eventually learn the hard way the cost of compromising its principles. Soon after Disney opened its park in Shanghai, a Chinese-owned theme park popped up a couple of hundred miles away, featuring characters that, according to news reports, look suspiciously like Snow White and other Disney trademarks. American companies must understand the stakes. The Chinese Communist Party thinks in terms of decades and centuries, while we tend to focus on the next quarter's earning report. But if Disney and other American corporations continue to bow to Beijing, they risk undermining both their own future, competitiveness, and prosperity, as well as the classical liberal order that has allowed them to thrive. During the Cold War, Lewis Powell, later Justice Powell, sent an important memorandum to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He noted that the free enterprise system was under unprecedented attack and urged American companies to do more to preserve it. The time has come, he said. Indeed, it is long overdue for the wisdom, ingenuity, and resources of American business to be marshaled against those who would destroy it. So too today. The American people are more attuned than ever to the threat that the Chinese Communist Party poses not only to our way of life, but to our very lives and livelihoods. And they will increasingly call out corporate appeasement. If individual companies are afraid to take a stand, there is strength in numbers. As Justice Powell wrote, strength lies in organization, in careful long-range planning and implementation, in consistency of action over an indefinite period of years, in the scale of financing available only through joint efforts, and in the political power available only through united action and national organization. Despite years of acquiescence in communist authorities in China, America's tech companies may finally be finding their courage through collective action. Following the recent imposition of the PRC's draconian national security law in Hong Kong, many big tech companies, including Facebook, Google, Twitter, Zoom, and LinkedIn, reportedly announced that they would temporarily suspend compliance with government requests for user data. True to form, communist officials have threatened imprisonment for non-compliant company employees. We will see if these companies hold firm and how long they hold firm. We hope they do. If they stand together, they will provide a worthy example for other American companies in resisting the Chinese Communist Party's corrupt and dictatorial rule. The CCP has launched an orchestrated campaign across all of its many tentacles in Chinese government and society to exploit the openness of our institutions in order to destroy them. To secure a world of freedom and prosperity for our children and our grandchildren, the free world will need its own version of a whole-of-society approach in which the public and private sectors maintain their separation but work together collaboratively to resist domination and to win the contest for the commanding heights of the global economy. America has done that before, and if we rekindle our love and devotion of our country and each other, I am confident that we, the American people, the American government, and American business together can do it again. Our freedom depends on it. Thank you very much.
And those are definitely some very important words from Barr, because we not only have companies cahooting with China and bowing to China, we have politicians as well, like Dianne Feinstein, who had a Chinese spy for 20 years, didn't even know it. There's been, yes, they are. Google, Facebook, and Zoom are also working with the Chinese. Now, it's funny how the Democrats always want to show you what bad guys Russia is. Well, Russians are bad guys, but they're not the real threat. They never have been. It's always been China. It's a diversion. You have Joe Biden and many other political figures also who've been taking bribes and favors. Who knows what else, including Hillary Clinton, has been working with the Chinese. Either sold them or just did not care about the administration did not care what China was doing, hacking into our systems or whatever they were stealing or whatever. So President Trump has really put the hammer down on these guys and has really done a wonderful job at this point, because we not only have severe tariffs on China, but we are still at phase 1 on trade deals. They still get our agriculture and stuff like that. But that's it. Phase 2 is on hold. It is on hold. Tariffs are still there. They're not going anywhere. They are going to pay a heavy price for this corona. They really are. And it's not just the U.S. It's many other countries who have talked about suing China. They do, for many years, they have been going around the world buying up property for minerals, like in Africa. But that's not going to be enough to save them. They've unleashed a terrible monster. And they're responsible. And once again, hats off to Tim Cotton, who has been calling out China from the beginning of this quote-unquote pandemic, which really I don't call it a pandemic. Apple, Nike, NBA, AMC, and Pedalwood, yes. On and on and on. Absolutely. They're definitely behind this. So you have a lot of things, and it depends on, let's see, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. They have a lot of problems more than they understand. You know, President Xi seemed like a nice guy, played the game, but Trump is always a step ahead. He knows better. He knows these people. Being a businessman for as many years as he has been and the millions he's made, you know he knows the game better. And he's very good at it. He has been the best, even with the dumb Democrats and the stupid rhinos. Okay, I thought you said something there. Who, me? Labor rules could cost billions in U.S. investments, but it's their fault. Now, these are just some of the same talking points that he had just made, which is still very important. We have had all these different companies go to China, but now, as Mr. Barr said, we rely too much on them. We have been. We are starting to bring them back. And I believe that the president is looking at the pharmaceutical companies right now, because that's really important. We get a lot of pharmaceuticals over there that come over this way. And in fact, even China sent us gloves that were actually just boxes of paper. That's a terrible joke. It really is. And I think they should get double punished for that one. When it comes to Russia, it's always been a hoax. It never was real. As I just said, it was a diversion. It's a coup. And if anybody cracks, it's got to be Clapper. Clapper looks a mess when he goes on TV. In fact, I got that clip of him actually throwing Obama under the bus. Orders came straight from the top. Humi says, I would rather see more mom and pop businesses and less big corporations. You know what? Mom and pop businesses are the backbone of this country. I think they are super. You have companies like Walmart. Look what they did. They were at the White House saying, we're going to work with you and, kumbaya, whatever. And now they've turned their back saying, well, everybody's got to wear a mask or they're not coming in the store. What happened to that? This is a company that makes billions of dollars a day. It's got to. Stores all around the world. And yet you have mom and pop stores on every corner. Has just the same brands. A little bit, maybe a little more expensive depending on where you go. A little bit cheaper. But that is America. Mom and pop stores. Every business started at the mom and pop stores or companies or workshop. It always started in one place and grew. If we can get all of these mom and pop stores to blossom the way Walmart did, there'd be many, many jobs. And when it comes to also Chinese technology, they are selling us drones. Us, our state, my state, just bought drones from China for the police, of all things. And they have done it in a few other states. Now, how much information is going to China depends on the drone. They're pretty sophisticated. Boogie Bumper Show, he had presented a clip where you don't need to remote control a drone. It will follow you. Literally, you just walk and it follows you. That's how sophisticated. Now, is it sophisticated enough to give information to the Chinese? Don't know. Do you think these Democrat governors care? No, they don't care. They never have. Thank you for the lemon, who me. I was born in '69. I was really nice, and life was really nice in the '70s, with the mom and pop businesses closed on Sundays. Yeah, I mean the only thing that a lot of those are closed on Sundays, but you still get like Walmart that they do get the business of selling alcohol, whatever, and they're open for many hours. Mom and pop shops are really nice. You know, you just can't describe it, you know. And it's a shame because around here, I see many are closing right now because of our dimwit governor, Whitmer. On the Russian collusion delusion. Breaking: U.S. Attorney Durham is in negotiations with some people on guilty pleas in Russia collusion scandal. Joe DeGeneva, U.S. Attorney John Durham are working guilty pleas with various deep state actors involving in the Trump coup attempt. U.S. former Attorney Joe DeGeneva was on the radio earlier today with Morning with the Mall, as part of his weekly interview. At the beginning of his discussion, DeGeneva discussed how the John Durham investigation, after the host shared an audio of the DOJ. Now, I did not read all of this, so I'm not sure what's there. I will come back to it if you want to listen to it or see what's there. That aired last week. Oh, that's from last week, excuse me. Here is a piece discussed with Bill Hammer on Fox that DeGeneva was in the leaner's head. Let's see. This is the piece I just jumped on. So I didn't get a whole... Alright, come on. Okay. Hammer. John Durham. When will there be news of that? Coupe. See, I don't have my cursor. Let me scoot this over just a little bit. There we go. That helps. Well, we hope to see a report by the end of the summer. Obviously, this is a criminal investigation. The goal is not to report the criminal investigation, but currently there is a story to be told there. The American people deserve a resolution, and frankly, justice deserves resolution. Hammer, okay. But you say, Quebec, justice needs to be restored. And the report that I think is going to be ready, pivotal to the resolution of the one tired system of justice. Hammer, then... Hammer, by the end of the Quebec, people need to see what's going on. So looks like he's kind of diverting the question. Joe DeGeneva then dropped some huge news regarding the John Durham's investigation. DeGeneva, I'm all for it. Hopefully, Durham, issue the reports as soon as possible and that the criminal charges occur. Therefore, I am frustrated by the sequence, but I'm delighted with what's happening. That is good news. DeGeneva, of course. Oh, we have audio. I like this. Of course, yes, it is exactly that could happen. You got that right, Vince. I suspected along the Durham was going to be the best and got something done by September, actually. I suspect it would be June. Instead, I know it was a timetable, but the COVID-19 virus put a damper on that, of course. Let's see what this audio is.
Joining us now, Joe DeGeneva, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Joe, I want you to listen to this exchange between Fox News anchor Bill Hemmer and DOJ spokeswoman Carrie Kupik, and then we're going to talk about it.
Is John Durham, when will there be news on that?
Well, we hope to see a report by the end of the summer. Obviously, this is a criminal investigation. The goal is not a report, it's a criminal investigation. But certainly there is a story to be told there. The American people deserve resolution, and frankly, justice deserves resolution.
Okay,
justice needs to be restored, and that report, I think, is going to be really pivotal to the restoration of that one-tiered system of justice.
So we should see a report by the end of the summer. Are you hopeful?
I am. I'm a little surprised by the notion that John Durham is going to publish a report before filing criminal charges. That's really fascinating to me. When I was an independent counsel of the United States investigating the Clinton passport scandal, I decided whether or not to bring charges, then I filed my report. That's the usual sequence. So it's pretty obvious, and that was actually a very surprising bit of public information from Carrie Kupik. So apparently the plan is to issue a public report about the nature of the coup d'etat and what went into it before criminal charges are filed. That's going to set up an interesting series of legal challenges to any charges that are brought later by suggesting that the report prejudiced potential jurors. But I'm all for it. I hope they issue the report as quickly as possible and that criminal charges follow thereafter. I'm fascinated by the sequence, but I'm delighted that it's happening.
Yeah, this has always been one of the prevailing mysteries about what precisely Durham would do. As you've said many times, Durham's job is not to create a report, it's to produce indictments. And we're expecting those. It could very well be, Joe, that these things happen at the same time, in concert with one another.
Of course, that's exactly what could happen. You've got it right, Vince. I have suspected all along that Durham was going to do his best to get something done by September. Or actually, I suspected it would be June, and indeed I knew that was the timetable. But the COVID-19 virus put off some grand jury appearances. And I do know that they are in negotiations with some people for some guilty pleas. So it may very well be that some guilty pleas occur initially at the same time the report is issued. That they may piggyback those together simultaneously.
You just said you know that some people are negotiating on guilty pleas. Do you know anything on the status of John Brennan, whose name has routinely come up as not yet being interviewed, but potentially soon being interviewed by John Durham?
No, and in fact, Brennan would be the last person in the world you would interview. You would only interview somebody like Brennan, who is believed to be the ringleader in the initiation of the false counterintelligence investigation of Trump and his campaign. You would only interview him last because he would be the chief conspirator in a criminal conspiracy, not a political conspiracy. It was that as well, but it was also a criminal conspiracy to violate the civil rights of a number of people. So Durham would be the last person, and you would only interview him after some people had pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate. Right. So you could do what they did to General Flynn, bring him in for an interview and hope to entrap him in a lie. But I can tell you this, Brennan will never agree to be interviewed. He will never make an appearance before a grand jury. He will take the fifth because he doesn't have any choice now.
Yeah, Adam Schiff did a podcast on crooked media with John Lovett. And in this, he talked about the Durham investigation. Here's what Adam Schiff had to say.
One of the concerns I have with Bill Barr is that the worst is yet to come. I mean, he's got a terrible, destructive track record as it is, and it may get worse in the coming days. But what we have seen largely is Barr's intervention to protect the president, Barr's misrepresentation of Mueller's work, Barr's intervention in cases to help Trump cronies like Stone and Flynn and others. What we have not yet had full visibility on is not Barr's use of the shield to protect corruption writ large of his boss, Donald Trump, but the sword. How he may be using the power of the Justice Department through Durham or others to go after the president's enemies. And in many respects, that is a far greater, more serious abuse of the power of the Justice Department than his use of the shield.
So it seems as if they're getting their talking points in order that, of course, discredit William Barr before the report from John Durham comes out. Is that where they're going to go with this?
Absolutely. They have been doing this from the very first time that Bill Barr, during his confirmation hearing, said that spying had gone on against the Trump campaign. This is a design strategy to delegitimize the Attorney General of the United States and any of his work product. And with the complicity of the mainstream media and the lying to the American people about what Bill Barr has done and is doing, these things can in fact accomplish their goal, which is to create public distrust of any final product, dirty up jury pools so that people come in prejudiced against the Justice Department or the case and in favor of the conspirators. This is not surprising. This is classic Marxist ideology, classic Marxist strategy. What you watched and listened to in that piece was Orwell's 1984. This is doublespeak. And what it is designed to create a knowingly false narrative so as to disrupt public discourse and public faith in institutions. The Democrats have gotten very good at this. It's actually what their party is about now, lying publicly to change policy and legal goals. That is a disgrace for one of the two major parties, but the Democrats don't care. They've made a deal with the devil, and they're sticking to it.
You know, it's amazing to me, Joe, as you say all of this, like normal people would hang their head in shame if they were caught with all of the lies that Adam Schiff has told in public. Everything from evidence of collusion to insisting that the Pfizer warrant applications against Carter Page were on the up and up, when the evidence comes out and it shows actually no, they were dramatic problems with it, 17 of them according to the Inspector General of the Justice Department. Yet Adam Schiff persists. Why?
Because he has to. In the old days, the Speaker of the House would have shut him down, taken away his chairmanship, and he would have been sent into the cloisters. But Nancy Pelosi has been completely compromised by the Marxist left of her party. Remember how she was against impeachment, and then all of a sudden she shifted, she bought in, and that was it. Once Pelosi changed ground, this was over. Adam Schiff was guaranteed longevity. He was guaranteed a continuing say in the future of the Democratic Party, and he was guaranteed a say in the destruction in a Marxist theme park of the United States system of democracy. We're watching a cultural civil war unfold, whether it's Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, wherever discord is occurring. These are leftist-controlled local governments which are perfectly happy to have discord, violence, and especially violence against the police because they are looking for ways to deconstruct society. For example, that's why Adam Schiff announced that he's going to continue to investigate Trump.
Open the chest for people in the live.
And leaves office. Can you imagine what that will do to the fabric of a country for a chairman of an intelligence committee to continue to investigate a former president? This is where we're headed, and this is not going to end well. This is already getting very ugly, and we are very, very few steps away from violence.
Joe DeGenova, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Have a great week.
You bet. You too.
I think that was really good information for all of us. And congratulations. Who, me? Thank you for the lemon. Oh, it was an ice cream. Excuse me. Thank you for the ice cream. There you go. Movie Time Blues. I got some 19 lemons. You're very welcome. Again, Clapper is going to be the weakest link. Brennan is going to be rock solid, as he said. More than likely going to plead the fifth, if called or questioned. McCabe probably is going to cave. Call me cave. The rest of them, they'll probably cave eventually. I think since they're more experienced FBI, they're probably going to be up there with Brennan. So Brennan he's a tough nut, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You can tell. He knows how to speak Arabic. He's talked very highly of the Muslims. And now he is collaborating in a coup. This was the dossier was the insurance policy in case Hillary lost the election. And they decided to pull the trigger on that. Now they're going to be paying the price. If we can get some guilty pleas out of it, I'm okay. They go away. They do serve their time with no provision. It's Brennan, Obama, Hillary, more them upper tier people who should do real hard time. Now, after a while, after the President Trump is out of office, the next president is able to pardon. But you're very welcome. Oh, you're very welcome, Renee. So let's just hope there's a different type of jury, like a military tribunal. I think this really calls for it. This isn't your everyday crime. This is a crime against our country, our very existence. Same with Antifa. It is a threat to our way of life, our country, our history that they want to destroy. Justice has to be done. People want justice done, especially in the Russian scandal. Putin has always maintained innocence. There was no collusion. Well, guess what they're doing already as far as when it comes to Democrats? Oh my gosh. They think the Russians are going to try to hack this election. Imagine that. What a shocker. Now, I've seen an article some months ago where they're already trying to drum up more false charges on the president in case he wins. Well, from my understanding, they can't, because that'd mean double jeopardy. He's already been acquitted. So they waste a lot of time, a lot of effort. They make the American people suffer with their greed, soullessness, and trying to keep themselves out of prison. It's going to go beyond the Obama administration. It's going to go into Congress. I would not doubt if Romney had something to do with this little stunt, if you will. You'll have Feinstein and all them other actors shift. You have Chuckles, who have been yelling and screaming for his impeachment and complaining and stubbornness that these people have. This is a president who plays to win, and he's going to win it for us. Not for himself, but for us. He cares about this country. He loves this country. He wants a better future for all of us and our children, for generations to come. And he's on the right track of doing this to restore America. He's done a hell of a job. Let's keep up. We just need to keep supporting him. We need to believe in him. We must not give up hope. We must do everything, donate, volunteer, to make sure we help President Trump get reelected. Including, we cannot forget, We must help fight for the House, regain it. We need to find mega candidates. We need to keep the Senate. Those are very important. We cannot ignore those. Do you think the Democrats have ignored that? No. Will they lose the House? More than likely. They squandered their time as usual, not passing important legislation, just doing the blame game. Excuse me. Pray for justice to these evil people. You got it. You're right, Humi. We must hang in there. We must continue to do what we can do to support him. He believes in us. Many believe in him. If you think you're not believing, come back. It's only going to get better. We must win the House and Senate and re-elect Donald Trump. This is a must. And for those in Michigan, please support John James for Senate against Gary Peters. It's a very important race. We have a good chance. I believe in my heart we will take California back and free them. We will take many states back that were blue. We will keep many states that flipped red. We cannot give up. We must not give up. Everybody must do their part, even in the smallest way. Volunteer. Make phone calls. Very simple. Donate directly to the president. Support local candidates. And if you don't have a candidate, run. Run for your town, your treasury, anything in your town. It makes a difference. It truly does. We all must pray for California. Absolutely. 2 seats in California that were blue flipped red. Those are key, important signs that traction is there. The protests against Newsom are there. The people must come out and vote against the Democrats. You want your freedoms back. You want to get rid of these lockdowns that are hurting your economy. You want to get rid of all these illegal aliens that do not belong here. We must vote Republican or MAGA candidates. That's even better yet. Romney, Collins, Murkowski. They are not Republicans. They're rhinos. Hopefully they will have challengers who will unseat them. Right now, from my understanding, Romney is very unpopular. Just for the fact he voted to impeach the president in the Senate. We all need to do our part. Show the love to the president. The walkaway movement is picking up steam. We could have Massachusetts, California, New Hampshire flip. With any slight luck, maybe, and it's a big maybe, and I'll be honest with you, maybe New York. This president is getting rid of the gangs. He's taking care of the drug dealers. He's helping our economy, down to the farmers, down to the mom and pop shops. Yes, we are having riots in this country. The president's taking care of it. He said he would. He's allowing, first, where it should be state level, to have the governors take care of their problems. They have the authority to call out the National Guard in their states, but they chose not to do so. So, the president says, okay, I got to take care of it. And he's doing it. Let's pray for the president, please. Let's pray for the vice president, military, law enforcement. Please be safe out there, men and women in blue, EMTs, first responders, and Coast Guard and Border Patrol. You all are doing a great job. Love y'all. And God bless you, and best in safety. And hopefully we can get back to normalcy. What we're going through right now is not normal. We're not supposed to wear a mask. That hurts us. That's not healthy. When somebody says this is a new normal, that's not normal at all. That is not normal. Period. They like to say there's a new normal. That's not normal. Thank you for joining. I do appreciate you all for watching, listening. If you want to comment, please. I'm all ears. If there's something different you like, I'm up to criticism. I'm up to suggestions and positivity. It's to make this informed for you. I am still working on the show, yes. I will promise I will begin to it extremely soon. I gotten some things done. I got a lot of things done. Now I need to pick a time. That's the hardest part. God bless you all. I will see you all around. Please, everybody, be safe, be happy, be kind to one another. That is definitely also very important to do. We must be kind to each other. We cannot be fighting with each other in this country. It doesn't matter what race you are, what you look like, we're all human beings. Yes, there are evil people out there, but we must pray for them as well, that they do get saved in some way. And I've said it before, those people rioting out there, they're going to have to live with the consequences. They know their actions. They know they're wrong. Justice should be served. More than likely, with this president, it will. God bless you all. Have a wonderful night. I will see you very soon.